Hey friends, welcome to our new podcast, Soul Care with Mindy Caliguire. And I'm joined again today by my friend and colleague, Lacey Mason, in from LA. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about some of the key learnings that we've had as I and we as a team have ventured into this work vocationally. So I'll tell a little bit about my own story and then get to the findings. But we're glad you're here. And we'll hope you'll subscribe and do all those great things. We want you to stick around for this conversation as it expands. So oddly, I shared a little bit last time about how my own soul health implosion was what brought me very surprisingly, unexpectedly into learning how to care for my soul as a priority, as a massive rearrange your life around it kind of priority. And over the years I've had, so while that was happening in that season, a really smart person that was part of our community at the time said, you should register that domain name. And I was like, what's that? He's like, yeah, you should go look and see if that URL is available. And again, I was like, what's that? And he's like, well, so we went, he showed me how. And sure enough, soulcare.com was available. Mm-hmm. And so many people to this day are so surprised that we have it. And it's just because it was so long ago that we began resourcing people with journals and ways to care for their soul. So anyway, now these many, many years later, this vision, this message, I was still writing, speaking, consulting, but it was always on the side of whatever my primary vocational work was. And then this little thing called a pandemic happened. And during that pandemic, after many years of executive leadership in ministries and in companies, I found that my days were being filled with opportunities to meet with individual leaders who were like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm dying. I can't keep moving. And the church has to go on, or the ministry is still pressing forward. We're in a complete free fall. We don't know what our donors are going to do. It was a very, very, very difficult season. Yeah. And so my network at this point was very large. And so people would call just for their own personal support, but then many would call and say, we're doing a gathering on Zoom. Would you come and present about soul care and help our people find their life in God in the midst of all this chaos? And over that year, so this is a conversation I've cared about for decades, but all of a sudden there was a growing acknowledgement that maybe this is a topic we should talk about. So I began a new conversation with the CEO of the company that I had been at and loved the team, loved the work. But it was like, I think I'm supposed to go figure out what soul care needs to become more as my full-time work.
Formally, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What are the ways we help people? What are the strategies for coming alongside individuals, organizations? How do we intersect people where they're actually living? Yes, maybe with ideas, but with practical help. So those were sort of the ideas in my head, but I didn't know what it would mean. So I began unwinding from that role. And early on in the process, I didn't know you that well. I didn't know you at all. I knew of your work, but I didn't know you. But in hindsight, I think we were doing a little bit of a qualitative research project.
Sure, yeah.
And the CEO of that company had done, when he started, what he called a listening tour. And I was like, that is such a great idea. I should do a listening tour where I interview the people that are in this network about this topic and where's the rub and how could we maybe think about being helpful in the future. And so,
well, and what would, when you say like about this topic, kind of how would you define like, what's the topic?
Yeah. And so we had 6 questions that I asked every single person, which I don't know if that's good methodology or not, but and the topic was, how is your own soul doing and why? What do you perceive as helpful or not in the organization that you're serving in? So it was totally aimed at the well-being of your soul as a leader, as a missional person. They don't have to be like the CEO, but as somebody whose work is more or less concerned with, as you were saying in another episode, other people's well-being. That's a certain kind of work. And anyway, so that's what I would say the topic centered around. One's own well-being, what was contributing or not to it, what thoughts had shaped their understanding of soul care prior to this. So those kinds of questions. I should have gone back and looked at actual questions, but I have it somewhere, I'm sure. And then we consolidated the verbatims that we wrote down in notes and sat in front of a whiteboard and wrote these all down and clustered the various topics. Like, what is this one saying? What is that one saying? And so that was the results of that listening tour before our team came together, before almost anything, was a further encouragement to me that there is a now moment right now that we want to try to intersect as much as we can. And there are many other good voices that are doing that right now, but for our part, it's like, how do we intersect that? So the first thing that we discovered was, and you said once that sometimes in talking to people, their stories make you think of your story.
Yeah.
So I think that was a little bit of what essentially I also experienced, but conclusively, everyone agreed that we are at an inflection point. That the sort of business as usual, drive, I'd rather burn out than rust out, like all these things that had been part of our culture, especially in ministry leadership, but beyond, there was a growing deep refusal to engage in that. And whether it took on the language of mental health, that people are saying, I can't keep going in this way, or it took the language of the impossibility of organizational goals that were just being handed down and people couldn't keep up with it. There were lots of different versions of it, but you could hear, and there were different ages. These were people in their 50s, 60s. These were people in their 20s and 30s, men and women, corporate and ministry, like lots of different contexts, all with a deep faith in God. But there was a range of life circumstances. But there was we're not going back. We are not going back. There was a deep refusal. We may not know what's ahead, but there is I can't do this anymore. And I don't think it's right. I don't think I should be living this insanity. So there was that inflection point.
Well, I think the interesting thing about the pandemic, in light of what you're talking about, is that, all of our kind of habituated behaviors and the just our normal ways of operating will just kind of continue on without some sort of disruption. Change requires some disruption, and so it makes sense that the shift that was happening outside of everyone's control, but it was happening, create an environment for people to be able to say, wait, this is an inflection point.
Yeah.
We now have opportunity to
choose a different path.
Right. Because we were sort of thrust out of our habituated ways of operating. So
yeah, because a lot of that goes unexamined.
Right.
We just sort of keep up with it, and we don't really stop and go, wow, what is this sustainable? Is this really what God's inviting me into? It just becomes, I talk a lot about, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but a lot about muscle memory. And I mean, that's a fact in our bodies when we've learned how to swim or train in certain ways. It can be used for good or for ill. But I think we have sort of spiritual muscle memory. That is one of the biggest challenges. If anybody's like right now, you're in the midst of saying, I'm at that inflection point. I'm ready to have a deep refusal and move forward. I don't know what that would look like, but you might get some ideas. You and I both talked about, there's authors and books and other examples we encountered in our journey. And you might conceptually start to understand what you'd like to be different, but man, that muscle memory, the spiritual muscle memory is hard. It is hard to overcome. I still might walk into a meeting thinking my whole well-being and everything is riding on this one meeting, right? And it's like to know in my head, I can take a breath. I am a part of the kingdom of God, and the joy I have is to work in his fields and serve with what I have to offer, and I can let go of outcomes. Like I might read an author that's challenging me to let go of outcomes and like, oh, I get it. That, of course, the outcomes are in God's hands. It's obviously not me. But for that to change how I walk into a meeting, now we're talking muscle memory.
Yeah.
And if I walk into a meeting with a team of even really great faith-aligned leaders who are basically saying to me explicitly or implicitly, don't screw this up, which is sort of the low-lying energy in a lot of climates of organizations. There's organizational muscle memory.
Oh, for sure.
That is the next level of overcoming. Anyway, so we're at an inflection point. I think there's a deep refusal. And to me, that said, it was confirming, like, keep moving. There's a moment right now that the body of Christ is ready for a new conversation.
Yeah.
The second learning we had was, and my way of writing it or phrasing it is that the future is about integration. Now, we talk about that a lot at Soul Care. We talk a lot about it. And I think what I heard in those interviews helps shape why that's so important in my own experience. But what I mean by that is, for many people, the examples they were given of moving into this deeper life with God was you had to jettison all the other things. No more jet fuel. It's only candles from now on. This is the problem. The jet fuel drinking is the problem. The call, the urgency, all that is the problem. And it's like, we were hearing from the people we spoke to that they had a desire to fulfill the things they felt called to, but from a different place. And that requires not a separation or an abandoning or jettisoning, a leaving, although there are times we have to, I'm talking about a deep refusal. There are things that we do let go and must. But the future is about integrating the different parts of us. And so I'm wondering, how do you see that? Maybe you have a comment on how you've seen that in some of our interviews and things like that you've done.
Well, yeah, I think if you can see your way forward into this idea of integration, it does help to create space for you to be able to hold the kind of the opposing forces, right? Or maybe not opposing forces is like too strong of language, but the reality of the life that you are living just as a person, and then vocationally, and then within leadership, right? There are expectations and responsibilities and demands and all of that. That's just part of being a human. That's part of being alive, right? And it can start to feel like, in order to experience soul health or contemplative way of being, or things like that,
peace and freedom and all those things.
And all of that, you have to walk away from all responsibility. And really, or not walk away from all responsibility, but like edit.
Feel like.
Yeah, there's start to feel pressure that you have to make things go away. And maybe sometimes there are things that we need to let go of, sure. But integration is really like this concept of bringing the pieces together so that they're supporting one another. So it's kind of symbiotic rather than, and you're integrating your soul health is in service to your overall flourishing spiritually, vocationally, relationally, like all of those things, right? Yeah. As opposed to taking time away from it, let's say, or it's a working together as opposed to
right. And the other parts we were hearing is people wanted to integrate the body and the soul, the mind and
that's
the
huge.
Soul, like my work and my soul health. It was like we were addressing these things in wildly different buckets,
right?
Isolated from one another. And it was like, no, soul health recognizes that all these things are integrated by this beautiful thing we call the soul, and that the scriptures talk about as a soul as our life. And so that the future about integration, and I'm even just thinking about this now in the light of some of the other studies we've done since, it's a really inspiring concept that I think is important for anyone to know, that even if you're in a hard space right now, you know, the future can be an integration of your responsibilities at home, your work life, your faith life, the body, all these things, they're meant to be experienced as an integrated whole.
Yeah. And so you're saying in the listening tour, you were hearing people express a longing for that, or an awareness that was something that they wanted.
Yeah.
But did they have a sense for how to achieve that?
No, that's why we phrased it that the future is about this, because it wasn't most people's lived experience.
Right.
It was, I have to go over here to talk about my mental health, and the church people don't want to hear about my mental health because that doesn't count over in that bucket. And then over here is my body, but I'm pretty sure that has to do with this and this.
Right.
And so it was more like, I can see a future where all of these things should be integrated, but we're not there.
We're not there.
Yeah. So that's how I would describe it. And it was almost like the dissonance of how frustrated people were to be like, I don't know how to make progress over here. If it does it matter to the other side of that? Does it matter to the other dimensions of my life or not? And so anyway, it was a really interesting cluster of ideas that we saw being about this desired future that has the integration. Yeah. So, it feels like there was one other thing I was going to say about that. Oh, I know. Sometimes I would encounter people who really did feel quite strongly and took action to be like, if I want to have my soul be healthy, I've got to exit everything I'm doing. And for some, if they are in a harmful, toxic place that is
Sometimes
damaging,
that needs to happen. I mean, I had to have a season like that in my life.
Yes. Yes. And so sometimes those are, that's real. But, and your journey and many other people's would be that reintegration comes at the right time.
Yeah.
But that others, I wanted to create space for, like, maybe it doesn't have to be that.
Sure. Well, and it would be great if we don't get to the point where that needs to happen.
Right. I don't know why. It just felt like I wanted to say that. There were leaders who, as they got to know me and the message of Soul Care, they're like, this is it. I want to quit everything I'm doing at this major, large church in a big city, and will we just be done? And I was like, okay, if that's what God's calling you to, by all means. But if there's any way you can stay, you will have my strong support, whatever resourcing I and others can bring to you in that space. Because if everybody who gets healthy leaves, we keep having a more and more concentrated lack of health.
I often think now, reflecting back on previous seasons of my life, when the momentum and the challenge was accumulating in such a way that it kind of got me to that place, right? If I knew then what I know now, I think my story would have looked pretty different.
Yeah.
And that's not, I don't hold any judgment in that, being like, oh, I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't know then what I know now at all.
No.
Not like that. But if I had the perspective then that I have now, and the practices and the toolkit and the guides and the different ways of thinking, I don't think I would have gotten to that place.
Yeah. My deep hope, Lacey, I'm glad you brought that up. Because I've had people say to me, Mindy, do people have to have a collapse before they will orient their life around this?
Yeah.
And my only answer is to say, I hope not.
Right.
I hope not. I hope, and again, no judgment around it. I had that, you've had that. It is many people's story that it comes to a point of crisis before there's willingness and acknowledgement to find that other path. But I hope that we are setting new norms. I hope by the work of our team and many others that this inflection point we're at is constructive in having a new collective imagination about what's possible. That we don't just assume that if somebody's been in a ministry for 2 years, they're probably burn out by then. And like, no, we can have a new norm. We can create those new norms so that, again, without shame for anyone's journey, by all means, never that. But the hope that the invitation, the language, the permissions, the narratives would become more of our collective reality. Yeah. All right. So, go ahead.
Well, I was maybe to tease it up a little bit, but I know we're going to, in the future, have a conversation about the research that we did with missionaries who are living and serving in the global South. And that project was inspired by the reality of how much attrition there is and how many people are coming out of the field. And so it's just that same idea of like, what is the state of soul health among people who are serving? And what is their awareness of soul care and soul health and flourishing and all of these, ways of being and sort of the lens through which we see our lives and our relationship with work and our relationship with God, that helps us be able to stay healthy in a way so that we are able to stay in the field, stay in the church, stay in the corporate world, whatever the calling is, in a way that doesn't compromise our flourishing, but allows us to, continue on and
give out of the overflow.
Yes.
Like that's what I love is like, hey, there is a future reality that you may not be experienced yet that is about out of living out of this integrated, healthy soul. There is an overflowing. But you're also alert to and comfortable with your limits. Like it's a much different picture. We'll get there someday, but still on the listening tour here. So the third thing I'm glad you brought that up about the Global South though, because that's another example where, circling back, we can't have it be the case that as everyone is waking up to this inflection point, that there's a deep refusal to go forward in unhealthy ways. We don't want that deep refusal to cause this mass exodus from meaningful kingdom work.
Yeah.
There's missional work. There's frontline, as you were mentioning, NGOs, the people that are in refugee camps and war zones and people who are, we've talked to all of them. They're actively working to do rescue operations. I mean, it's inspiring. It's inspiring and it's beautiful and it's good. And it needs the right underpinning because we can't have everybody that's like recognizing maybe they're not healthy be like hitting the eject button.
Right. Like
we want God's purposes through amazing organizations happening all over the world. But anyway, okay, so glad you brought that up. The third thing that we discovered in this listening tour, it was a bit of a sad one for me. And it was that people were reporting that the current state of how they experienced or were thinking about or how their organization was thinking about the topic of soul care, soul health, was that it was still primarily marked by a lot of kind of confusion. What does that mean? And even in some places, some outright suspicion. Like, if I take time for that, that'll be the end of my career. That'll be the end of my fruitfulness. I don't have time to light the candle and be with God. That is suspicious. Yeah. And maybe it has, weird roots. Maybe it's new agey. Maybe it's too much from a tradition that I don't agree with. And so there was a lot of suspicion and confusion among the initial people that we interviewed, which you were a little surprised to hear that. But
well, maybe initially, but actually the more I operate within this space and within this conversation, I have become more sensitive to that. And even when I hear myself talk about it, even maybe I've already done it in this conversation, I think I have, I will qualify what I'm saying or use different words. Like I'll say, when we're talking to people about things like soul care, soul health, flourishing, spiritual formation, I'll list all of those things because inherently I get that language isn't necessarily familiar and it can be confusing and I want to try to make sure that,
You're going to catch them with one of them.
Right, exactly. So it's not surprising that there's confusion around that and suspicion and yeah.
I think the confusion came in a couple categories. One, if I can kind of riff and recall on it, I think one was, well, what does soul care actually mean, right? This is a term in our culture. There's soul food, there's soul care, there's like soul
self-care.
Yeah, there's a lot of different words that are
exactly
adjacent to one another, truly in their meaning. And so some people weren't like, what do you even mean by soul care? And maybe we should pause and define that. But so that was like one whole category of the confusion. But the suspicion is a couple clicks below that.
Right.
It's like, I think I know what you mean, and I don't know if I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I feel nervous about what that might mean.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
Well, I just thinking about like in, I think it's in Celebration of Discipline, Richard Foster is talking about prayerful meditation. And there's, some very clear explanation around there's this kind of meditation and there's that kind of meditation. And, so anyway, just to say like there is that confusion and suspicion is there. And I think people benefit from having things clearly defined, so they can understand what are we actually talking about here.
Yeah. So maybe we should pause and define what we're talking about.
For all you out there who are
for everyone
who are currently suspicious and confused about what we're talking about.
Apologies, we haven't defined our terms. And often I don't go to defining spiritual formation unless somebody specifically asks me about it because it's just such an unusual term. Yeah. And so I won't bother with that. But in terms of the care of the soul, we really see that in the scriptures, God uses the term in the Greek word is suke for soul. In the Hebrew is nephesh. And in both the Old and New Testaments, that word is alternatingly translated soul as we think of it now or life. And that is one big insight that we need to get to, at least for most of us who are coming from a more theologically evangelical context. Yeah. There's a little bit of suspicion of, well, your soul's fine, you're saved, get on with it, basically. And we have a slightly inert way of thinking about and talking about the human soul, and it comes out like we don't really talk about the soul unless we're talking about its kind of eternal destiny.
Right.
It's very binary. Souls are saved or unsaved, they're lost or found.
Within the context of salvation.
Correct. Yeah. And we don't think about, we don't have a way of saying, my soul is very much saved and very not well. Mm-hmm. Like the concept of well is where health comes in. Is like, but if we don't understand that the soul and the life, like as it goes with your life, or actually as it goes with your soul, so it goes with your whole life. So everything that makes you who you are. And Dallas Willard talked about this so beautifully, and we won't go into all of this in Renovation of the Heart, and talking about the different dimensions of the soul and how the soul is what integrates, or dimensions of personhood, and how the soul is what integrates and holds those things together. Yeah. And that is a much more robust understanding of soul than we usually in a shorthand way talk about it. Ministries will be giving reports of how many souls are saved or whatever, but it's like the very person writing that newsletter might be very saved and very not well. Mm-hmm. And so we have to create the construct of well or not so well. And so when the soul is healthy And I like thinking about symptoms. What are the symptoms of a healthy soul or of an unhealthy soul? That's what helps us start to become self-aware of all that. I could go on and on about this, but maybe we'll save that for another episode.
Well, it's just interesting that language of integration comes up again too, as we start talking about like the role of the soul and soul health as being, maybe the facilitating piece of integrating all of this together into your life.
Yeah, it does that. So, defining our terms, helping people come to a collective understanding. I feel this a burden as I communicate with leaders about soul care and soul health, of connecting the dots between what they already firmly believe in. Like that phrase, I think it's the most famous rhetorical question from Jesus of how could you benefit if you gain the whole world but forfeit your soul? Well, that many of us are very familiar with that, but we think of it as an evangelistic appeal. We think of it as a way you would make a compelling case to somebody who might not have a current relationship with God. How could you benefit if you basically chase fame and fortune and miss eternity with God is sort of our way of saying it. But that actual passage, Jesus is not talking to the crowd that might be following him. He's talking to his disciples. That's us. That he is talking to people who have already dropped their nets and left everything to be with him. And it's like, well, what does that mean if he's making that question, that rhetorical question, which there is only one answer to? Obviously, that doesn't make any sense to gain the whole world. But what if we use different like ministry things? How could you benefit if you built the next multi-site church and forfeited your soul? How could you benefit if you began operations in another new country or another new language but forfeited your soul? And I don't mean to be dismissive of this. Those things feel very urgent and very real. And we're not used to counting a cost of our own soul's well-being as we advance the mission of the cause. And that's a thing our team is trying to stay very alert to in our own rhythms and practices as a team. Like, how are we making sure to undergird our own soul health so that we're giving and leading out of the overflow rather than out of deficit? Because first of all, I just think it's a better way to be, but we certainly don't want to be not living what we're inviting other people into.
Yeah. But there's some helpful connecting of the dots in thinking about what is forfeiting your soul. As you were saying, like if you start to think about it within the context of who Jesus was actually talking to, learning how to have sort of a new or deeper understanding of what is forfeiting of the soul and what is soul health. What does that mean? What does that look like? And learning how to have like kind of greater imagination around that, I think, feels like that's an important piece of the inflection point of being like, wait, there's something else going on here that's happening on a deeper level than just there's the pushing and the driving on one side, but then there is the sort of the forfeiting of the soul on the other side, and understanding like what does that mean? And then when you can kind of flip that into, okay, so now I start to understand what is the role of a soul that is not well. What does it look like now when the soul is well? And how does that start to change the picture? That gets really exciting and hopeful and like interesting in a whole different way.
Well, you think of the word forfeit is basically to give over, right? To forfeit. I'm going to forfeit the game. I'm going to forfeit my, whatever.
Handing it
my
over.
thing. It's handing it over. And instead to take ownership for the well-being of my soul, to set the well-being of my soul not as a selfish thing, but as a first order priority, as a healthy soul, the overflowing of what happens out of a healthy soul, an integrated life, it starts to feel like that pearl of great price, that there was a field that it might cost you a lot, to arrange your life. You could maybe do it very much within the context of everything you're currently doing, but it will require some radical retooling under the surface. That sometimes you can do while you go. Sometimes it needs a break to re-engage healthier rhythms. But man, that's the everything game.
Yeah.
We don't want to forfeit that soul. We want our life with God. That's when a soul is healthy, is when it's real time, in the moment, sense of connection to the living God is active. It's a vine and a branch. It's receiving its life from God. It's not just intellectual assent to things I believe about God, or a willing, strong-willed desire to serve, and which is lovely, but that's not where we draw our energy from. We have to turn away from all that out on the branch and draw into the place of connection. And there's practices that help us do that. There's relationships that help us do it. All of those we think of as ways we care for our soul. We don't bring life to our own soul, but when we bring that intentionality to that place of connection, that's when the life of God comes from that place of connection out into our life and does whatever God wants to do.
Yeah.
It's a very different way.
Sorry if this steers us a little bit off of the listening tour findings, but you just used the word selfish. And I think that is a big piece here. And I hear it all the time. I mean, I've had hundreds of conversations with leaders about this topic over the last few years, having many conversations right now for a project that I'm working on. And there is this sense of caring for the self and the soul is selfish to prioritize myself over others, or this meeting, or answering the phone at 9:00 at night when a volunteer calls or a donor calls or whatever. There's a sense that could actually be selfish, or that I will be perceived as that I'm being selfish. What do we do with that?
Yeah. First of all, let's just say it is not selfish to hold boundaries. Now, navigating those boundaries, communicating them respectfully over time, especially if you've lived a relatively boundaryless life, which I had, it takes time. And so we have to be giving ourselves grace. But let's just say living from overflow, from wellness, is what God would want for you. And that is not selfish that you would desire to live that way. Navigating, getting to, okay, how would my day look different? How does my week look different? How do my months look different? What would I need to build into my own personal rhythms to get to that? Maybe I have a new relationship with notifications on my phone, but maybe I first, as a gesture, explain to my board, I'm in a rough spot right now, or maybe even that I don't want to be known in, but I need to guard some time with my family on Saturday nights. So love you all. This is what you can expect. It's just like in business, we call it a service level agreement, right? You can expect to hear from our customer service team within the next 24 to 48 business hours, and it's maybe a little service level agreement needs to be communicated between team members, between a board or whatever. But I find that, I know this isn't always the case, but I find I sit on several boards. As a board member, you want your executive director or CEO, whatever their role is, you want them flourishing. You don't want to be the reason they're upside down. So I think this is part of the inflection point we're at. I think, boards, the work we're doing with the ECFA and the forthcoming Leader Care new standard, I know I'm bringing up a lot of things that we haven't talked about yet, but these are signals that the ecosystem is starting to respond to the call for health. And that is a very good sign. So it is not selfish, back to your initial question. It usually takes a matter of negotiating out of respect for these relationships. I mean, if you're just done and you can't pick up the phone at 9:00 at night, then don't, and you'll have to clean it up later. But the perception, you got to let go of what those people perceive. But there are things you can do as a leader would to sort of get in front of that. Like, here's what I sense on the horizon for me personally, and here's what that could mean and how I'm communicating. Like, you're leaders, you know how to do this. You just need to decide to solve for this instead of all the other things you're solving for. And this being your soul's well-being. And as you, and your teams, but let's start with you. As you consider, all right, where am I at right now? And what things might I need to put in place to get there, to build into my life the kinds of practices, relationships, all that kind of stuff that would ensure my health over time or contribute to it. You just start to figure that out. Who needs to know that this is a new priority to me? How do I communicate it to my executive team? How do I communicate it to our volunteers? I think, again, given this inflection point we're at, I think more and more people are going to respect a leader who says, here's some boundaries I'm holding for my own and my family's well-being. I think that's a good thing. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, no, definitely. But the thing, all of our behavior is driven by our deep kind of emotional, the narratives that help to create those emotional drivers in us, right? And so as a researcher, if I'm looking at a behavior or a behavior change that we're hoping to initiate or inspire or whatever, right? I have to then go a level deeper and question like, okay, well, what's the motivating narrative there that will enable that behavior to happen, right? And I just wonder, we've not had this conversation before. So
it's good to have it with everybody.
Why not just have it with the world? I don't know. This will be interesting. We'll see where this goes.
I love it.
What do leaders, people who need to be getting out ahead of this and sort of understanding that caring for themselves in this way is not selfish, right? It brings me to the question of like, what do they need to believe is true about God in order to have that deeper motivation there to do these things on behalf of their own wellness? And I think that there's something in there about like really accepting the love of God in a way that you can say, just who I am as a person, outside of anything that I could ever do or be or impact that I would inspire, that I matter to God and my well-being matters to God, and that God wants me personally to be well, not just for the sake of
the cause,
yep, but because God loves me and the people I'm serving and the people in my organization. And do you know what I'm saying?
I do. It's funny. I was just telling somebody this story. You're right. We haven't ever talked about
I
this.
know.
And I love
sorry.
it. No,
sorry
it's great. I love it.
Spring this one on
I
you.
love it. I love it. This is what we're learning how to do podcasting. It's fun. I love it. And I love how you think about these things. So I welcome it. But it's making me think of a story I just shared with somebody last week, that this idea of mattering to God.
Yeah.
So Jeff and I had become involved with the ministry of Willow Creek. We were church planting interns there. And it was after that intern year that we went to start this church in Boston. And one of the key sort of rallying cry slogans that Willow was known for, and in very constructive ways, was that lost people matter to God.
Yeah.
Which
sure.
for the church in the 80s especially was like a wake-up call. Like, hey, it's not only the 99 who are sitting in your church that matter to God. God cares about the sheep, the one.
Yeah.
What does it mean to go after the one and leave the 99? Those were big parts of the rhetoric and the call to helping a church hold space for people who were not yet convinced. So it was a beautiful call. We brought that with us to Boston. And man, a couple years into getting our bells rung. I mean, we were, people get all excited and they want to be part of your core, and then you're having Thanksgivings and turkeys and Christmas celebrations and birthdays, and then they get mad at you and then they leave. And I mean, that's just on repeat when you're in a situation. And I'm sure most of it we deserved, but it was just hard. Financially hard. We never knew if we could make it. Ends meet. That's a lot of stress for 10 years.
Yeah.
There was one period that I knew 2 months in a row we could cover our mortgage or rent. I mean, that is a hard, chronic financial instability that we had. And kids come along, and then there's, of course, the spiritual opposition that you're contending with in the unseen. So it was a heavy, heavy, hard time. And Jeff especially started to experience some really significant depression. And he's written about this. I've written about it in places. He's obviously not there any longer, but that was a really hard thing. And in the early 90s, we had no language for that.
Right.
All I knew is he was angry and fearful all the time and kind of suspicious of, I don't know, it's not the right word, but it was a very difficult time. And I did what I only knew how to do, which is like buck up, little camper, keep working harder, keep holding it all together, keep doing more and more, over function, right? So we were a classic mashup of unhealth in that season. And by God's grace, so many beautiful things happened. A beautiful community came together and good things came of it, but it was a hard season. And I remember saying to him at one point, like, Jeff, it's not just lost people that matter to God. You matter to God. And I don't think at that time he could even let that in.
Yeah.
And so while I think you're exactly right about that moment of awareness, and that's what people report to us, that when they enter into these different ways of stilling their mind, of connecting with God, of engaging scripture in different ways, of taking time for solitude, of having guidance, relationships that are, all the different ways of caring for your soul, often they will report back this, I woke up to the love of God for me in a whole new way.
Yes.
But Lacey, what I found is I'm processing this with you live, so we'll see if we ever do anything with this. It might just hit the edit floor. I think it's a hard thing to convince someone of preemptively because it almost has to be experienced.
Yeah.
Because logically, they all know the Bible better than either of us.
Right. If
they
you
know,
said, does God love you? Yes.
Yes.
Do you matter to God? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
but there is a deeper knowing that is,
that comes out of brokenness.
Yes.
That comes out of, I don't have anything left to offer, to be. I'm not impressive. Everything's falling apart. And somehow there's a stillness that gets met by this whisper, a divine whisper that says, I see you, I love you, you matter. You don't just matter for what you produce. You, your heart, your eyes, your smile, that matters to me. And I think that's what God does say when we open ourselves to that. I'm still wondering how to invite people into that awareness. But my hope is, and my suspicion is, it does have to do, and this is a lot of how we work with soul care. It's like, how are we creating space in whatever we're doing for people to encounter God?
Yeah.
Because that's what's compelling. That's where I want to get out of the way and let, what does God want to say to that person? My words don't matter. Yeah. Whew. Okay, that hits a couple tender places. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but that's, how do we lose that in the midst of our service? I think God's doing a move of healing around the world. And I do believe that there's growing openness. We are at this inflection point. The future, we are learning, we're moving into that future now. More and more people are living that integrated, healthy future life and coming to that conclusion that they matter. But it's interesting. Some people think this is just the boomers and Gen X that are burning out. This is, I'm hearing 20-year-olds And they're going to their supervisors and ministries going like, hey, I need a sabbatical. And the supervisor's like, wait, you're 24 and you need a sabbatical. But what's underneath that? They're reaching for the one thing that they know to ask about that is usually a gift after 7 to 10 years of service in an organization. But that's a legitimate request that's coming forward. And what's underneath it and how do we meet that? I don't know. I think we're at a moment of healing. There's a new willingness, new healing. And it's not going to be teachers like me with a new way of saying a thing. It's going to be the living God connecting with people's souls.
Yeah.
That's what's going to do it. All right. So enough on that. Suspicion, confusion, we did that. The fourth learning was also a bit of a harder thing to notice when we laid out all the people's comments. And it's our way of phrasing the summary idea is that the how matters more than ever. The how we talk about, I guess is what we've just been saying. We went there. The how we talk about spiritual formation, soul care, soul health matters more than ever because there's a bit of a legalistic bent that this topic can be assumed to be bringing. There's a bit of a judgy feel that is not at all what the communicator is bringing. But again, that the layers of narratives that we're listening to this with, are you saying I'm just not praying enough? Are you saying I don't have enough faith? Are you saying, like, it's like we're just waiting for one more person to tell us we're screwed up and messing up. And it's like, oh man, the how of approaching this topic in this very tender, sensitive, nuanced place of the intersection of people's life with God and their life of service. The how we approach that matters more than ever. And it feels like that we need to, and it's like, we got to take off our shoes. That's holy ground. That's something you don't run roughshod over. And we're still learning. I think we as an organization are still learning that. I think the conversation is maturing, but there are a couple of people that we talked to who this topic ended up becoming like fingernails on the chalkboard in their organization. And it was there were people over here who got it and people over here who didn't get it. And if you were part of one group or another, it was polarizing to the staff community. I just heard several of these stories. And I just took away that the how we talk, the how we act, the how we do, we do not put our noses in the air that we have some sort of special knowledge that other people don't have. It's like we put a serving towel over our arms and with empathy and humility walk into these very sacred spaces that are very important and never diminish the calling on somebody's life, never question their devoted love for God, never. Like, these are things that we want to make sure to honor and respect as we have these conversations. And I hope that we are. But that's just one of the things we learned. How would you see that? How have you heard any similar things in your circles?
I do have the concern that this conversation with leaders, if not handled, if not absolutely like approached from the deepest place of grace, right? And love and gentleness, could just make them feel like I should be doing more than I'm already doing. And these are now just more things on my to-do list that I can't do.
Right. You're just telling me another way I'm failing.
Right. And now let's just heap shame upon, and that is not anywhere near the realm that we want to be engaging. And I mean, that's not, certainly not in any way reflective of how God would ever want this conversation to be happening.
Right.
So, I think one of the things I've always loved, and I don't know where this originated from, but in my training in spiritual formation, in my education, my formal education around it, one of the things that was continually said to us is the golden rule here is do as you can, not as you can't. Do as you can, not as you can't. Do as you can, choose the things that will be life-giving to you, that will be supportive of your soul health, but don't do as you can't. There's no pressure, there's no should in any of this. And I just think that that's really important.
That's an interesting comment. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. I think this began, I began having awareness on this when, this was years ago. I did a thing on Moody Radio with Anita Lustria and Melinda Schmidt and the Midday Connection. And I remember them asking me, like we were talking about soul care week after week and different practices, simplicity and soul, spiritual friendship and, just different journaling, different practices. And they said to me, I'm pretty sure it was them, or it might have been a caller, like sometimes we would take callers in. And it was like, what would you say to a single mom who's on public transportation going to 3 different jobs to keep her family together? And it's like, well, first of all, of course this is available to her. Of course. Isn't God's heart so tender and towards her? And how is she on the bus able to experience that as a God with her moment? How is she able to breathe and be alert to God being with her in that moment, and that she's never far from him? And it's not like she needs to sit down in a lakeside property with a leather journal and have 4 hours of solitude. Like that's, if you can do that, do it. I mean, that sounds great. I don't think I've done that, but if that's available to you, great. But it's maybe that idea. Yeah. Do as you can, not as you can't. Like, what does it look like for her quietly sitting in that very public space to remember that God is with her and that she can talk with him quite openly about whatever the concern of the day is? Is that conversational way of life available to her? And it takes some imagination to recall, takes some paying attention to being like, oh, I can be talking to God right now, instead of doom scrolling or worrying or whatever is the thing I might otherwise be doing. And over the years, I've seen it's not just that persona. It's like executives that are running multiple companies around the world, and they're on flights and they're, they're spinning up orgs, they're doing acquisitions, it's like, how is God and God's presence available to them in that next budget run as they're having to do a riff? As they're like, where is God with them in that? And how can they be intentional about building that life with God in that season of life? And you can mention any number of other, I always think of a mom with like a 2-year-old and twin infants. Like, if their life with God is not available to her and to that executive, could also be a woman, and to that single mom on a bus, whomever it is, then we're painting a picture of something, but it's not. It's not the life that Jesus is inviting us into. And shame on us if we're doing anything that tells someone this is not for them. Every scenario of those 3 and 1,000 other scenarios would be wildly different in terms of how they would bring the intentionality around their life with God to work in that context. But it's absolutely available to everyone always. Yeah. So the how we approach it matters more than ever. That is the end of our listening tour. But when we did a readout to our leadership community, we had a lot of people that have been tracking with this conversation, that are, have maybe responsibility for the care of souls in their organization or their church or whatever. And so we did a readout of this. And one of our team members at the time had introduced me to a poem that I thought might be a fun thing to conclude with. And it's from John O'Donohue.
I love John O'Donohue.
I was unaware of his work prior to this, but I'm just going to read this poem, and you may hear this and feel like it relates to you today. I know it did for me personally, but also on the cusp of leaving all of my various former vocational commitments and being like, all right, God, what do you want soul care to become? Here we go. So, listener, I hope this will be a way that you can, I don't know, maybe encounter God. Close your eyes if that's available to you. I'm just going to read this poem, and it's called The Interim Time from John O'Donohue. You are in this time of interim, where everything seems withheld. The path you took to get here was washed out. The way forward is still concealed from you. The old is not old enough to have died away. The new is still too young to be born. You cannot lay claim to anything in this place of dusk. Your eyes are blurred and there is no mirror. Everyone has lost sight of your heart, and you can see nowhere to put your trust. You know you have to make your own way through. As far as you can, hold your confidence. Do not allow your confusion to squander this call which is loosening your roots in false ground, that you might come free from all that you have outgrown. What is being transfigured here is your mind, and it is difficult and slow to become new. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become for your arrival in the new dawn. And we just say, yes and amen. Mm-hmm. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Lacey.
Thank you.